Redistricting Commission community hearing. My name is Michelle Sosa Acosta, and I'm a Deputy City Attorney. Also with us is Sarah Isa, our Senior Planner, Brian Demore, our City Engineer, and the Honorable Commissioners of the Independent Redistricting Commission. Next slide, please. First, some housekeeping items. We have translation services available for those who would wish to view this presentation either in Spanish or also with American Sign Language. We will have public comment periods throughout today's agenda, as well as time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. Para las personas que deseen escuchar esta presentación en español, favor de seguir las siguientes indicaciones. Hasta abajo de su pantalla se encuentra un pequeño mundo. Mueva su cursor encima del mismo. Aparecerá una ventana indicando inglés o español. Presione español. Listo. Podrá usted escuchar la voz del intérprete en español. Next slide, please. In today's agenda, we will be introducing the Independent Redistricting Commission. We will also be reporting on the final civic engagement and outreach plan, which will cover the redistricting process and timeline. The IRC will then consider the plan and approve if need be. We will then have a presentation by National Demographics and a discussion of future agendas. Next slide, please. We will now provide a time for public comment. If you wish to comment, please raise your hand and you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Okay, it looks like we have one hand raised right now. All right, E. Howard Green, I'm going to unmute you or allow you to talk, and then please unmute yourself and you'll be allowed to speak for the 2-minute segment. Okay, please unmute yourself now, Howard.
Thank you. I am pleased to see the work that's gone into this redistricting project. I think it's a little bit of overkill. In the 5 years since the 2015 decision was made, I can imagine that most of the districts today would fall within the 10% allowance for deviation from the mean, as it were. I don't know if that's plus 10 and minus 10 or whether it's plus 5 and minus 5. In any case, my guess is that maybe 2 districts have shifted slightly. One got a little bigger, one got a little smaller. Probably they're adjacent. Most of the districts are adjacent, although there are a couple that aren't. So my thought is that staff or National Geographics should immediately apply the state numbers and see how it balances against before. You have an expensive and long public outreach. I was the only speaker that talked to the council when they had their recent meeting about your activities. So the other thing I'd like to ask, and perhaps you can answer online or perhaps you have to email me, is where can I see the state's allocated data to our city? We got some early numbers. I think it was at the July or August meeting of the commission, but there was a request to drill down and compare with 2015. Thank you.
Thank you so much, E. Howard Green. It looks like if anyone else has any questions, please raise your hand in the Zoom function and we will hold that space for you. Alrighty, I don't see any more attendees asking or raising their hand, so we will call it at that. Thank you so much, everyone.
We will now introduce the Independent Redistricting Commission. Next slide, please. In March 2021, the City Council appointed the Independent Redistricting Commission, also known as the IRC. The IRC was meant to prepare electoral district maps using the 2020 Census Bureau data, as required by City Charter Section 1301. The Honorable Commissioners are 3 esteemed retired judges who do not reside in Santa Barbara County. Next slide, please. Honorable Johnson is the chair for the IRC and is considered one of Ventura County's top judges. She is widely recognized for her keen intelligence and often has been described as a versatile, calm, compassionate, even-handed, and caring individual. Honorable Johnson currently serves as an arbitrator and mediator for JAMS, a United States-based for-profit organization of alternative dispute resolution services, including mediation and arbitration. Next slide, please. Also on the IRC is Honorable Khan. After more than 30 years on the Los Angeles Superior Municipal Courts, Honorable Khan joined Signature Resolution as a mediator and arbitrator. He focuses on resolving matters related to business and commercial contracts, employment, real estate, among other disputes. Prior to his appointment to the bench, Honorable Khan served as a special prosecutor in the Major Fraud Division of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, where he prosecuted complex real estate, commercial and industrial fraud, Medicare, welfare, and embezzlement cases. Next slide, please. Our last member of the IRC is Honorable White. Honorable White joined JAMS after having served 23 years as a judge in the Los Angeles Supreme Court. She chaired numerous committees while on the bench and has also been a frequent lecturer for judicial education throughout California. Using her extensive knowledge, Honorable White serves as an arbitrator and a mediator, handling disputes in business and commercial, civil rights, employment, among other disputes. Next slide, please. The IRC serves a crucial role in the redistricting process. They are tasked with the final approval of the city's outreach efforts and redistricting process plans. They will oversee the redistricting process and engage with the city's demographer, National Demographics, in reviewing draft maps, including maps submitted by the public. They will also submit to the City Council a final redistricting map for adoption. I will now turn it over to our senior planner, Sarah Isa, to present on our final civic engagement and outreach plan. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Sosa Acosta. My name is Sarah Isa. I'm a senior planner with the City of Santa Barbara, and tonight I will report on the final civic engagement and outreach plan for the IRC's consideration. Excuse me. Next slide, please. The Civic Engagement and Outreach Plan describes tools and strategies to maximize public participation by Santa Barbara residents in the city's electoral redistricting process. The outreach plan relies on multiple strategies for participation to allow as many members of the public as possible to learn about district-based elections and participate in the district map redistricting process. The plan includes multiple strategies based on the goals and objectives of the plan, which I will explain next. Next slide, please. The desired outcomes of the outreach plan are to educate city residents about redistricting requirements and to assure diverse community participation in the process for redrawing district maps based on the new 2020 census data. The goals of the outreach plan are to encourage participation by a diverse range of city residents and also use a variety of outreach tools to make it easy for community members to provide input. The plan also involves traditionally underrepresented and marginalized communities in the process, including ethnic minorities and low-income communities for whom language and cultural differences and a lack of access to technology may otherwise preclude or discourage involvement. Next slide, please. The city will deploy a variety of outreach tools in order to maximize awareness of and opportunity for participation in the redistricting process. This includes digital outreach efforts through social media containing text and infographics. We have also created a public flyer, which was posted throughout the community on last Friday. We also have a project website, which is up and available now, that includes background information and meeting materials, a calendar of outreach events, and frequently asked questions. All products are available in Spanish and English. Next slide, please. The city plans to hold 8 public hearings between tonight and March 14th, 2022, in order to solicit input from city residents with respect to redistricting based on this new data. The plan calls for 2 introductory hearings, which the first of which is tonight, and the second one will be on October 20th, 2022. The individual district hearings, districts 1 through 6, will be held beginning in January 2022 and will go through March 14th, 2022. And then the deadline for adoption of redistricting maps by the City Council is April 17th, 2022. Also, all meetings will be held either in the evening or on the weekend. All meetings will be recorded and posted online. They will be available in Spanish and will also have ASL interpretation. In-person meetings will include childcare. We're hoping that we can host the 6 individual district meetings in person, but we're prepared to pivot if we are required to because of COVID. Also, all meetings will include light refreshments as well. Next slide, please. So the individual district hearings will begin with District 1 on January 8th, 2022 at Franklin Elementary School, and will conclude with District 6 at the Carrillo Recreation Center on March 14th. Next slide, please. And this is a summary of the district hearings, and the final council approval of the maps would occur on April 12th, 2022. At this time, Chair Honorable Johnson, you can declare the public hearing open and accept comments from the public on the civic engagement plan.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone. Could I just inquire of our parliamentarian, Mr. Colon, if we should have public comment, and then if the members of the commission wish to ask questions or have comments, we'd follow with that. Would that be the order?
Your Honor, the law allows you to do it either way.
I think I'd rather hear from the public first, unless the members of the commission feel otherwise. Judge Kahn, Judge White.
I agree with that.
I think that's appropriate.
Thank you. Then if there are any public comments to be made, and I'm going to leave the technology to Ms. Osa Acosta from the last time, if anyone wishes to make public comment. Would you like to take over that portion of it?
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Do you want me to handle this?
You must, because I don't have the ability to call on people. So please go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, I'll run this then. Thank you so much. Okay, if we have any attendees that would like to ask any questions or comments, please raise your hand. All right, we've got an E. Howard Green. All right, I'm going to unmute you and then have you unmute yourself.
Good evening again. One of the things that I'd like to observe is the website you mentioned is a little hard to find, but it is searchable on Google Santa Barbara IRC. But it is woefully lacking. There have been slides that were used, for instance, on August 25th. They are not on your site that I can see. Perhaps they're in the archive section, which seems to be empty. In any case, I'd like to know and have on the record the names of the staff people, because they're the ones who actually will affect a lot of the procedural activities. As I earlier said, there wasn't a lot of interest in this topic at the council meeting last week. I'm wondering if you can tell us roughly how many lay people are watching as opposed to people like councilmen and administrative officers are listening to this conversation. Again, I have an explicit and specific request for the slides from tonight be posted tomorrow, and that Mr. Ramirez maintain a log of correspondence and that be available also. You want transparency. The 6 district meetings, I think, are overkill, but it certainly shows the right direction. Nothing is in your plan on the use of Channel 18 that I've seen. Channel 18 is an important vehicle. It should be broadcasting right now this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, E. Howard Green. All right, and I see another hand raised. We've got Carla iPhone. So I'm going to allow you to talk, and then please unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi there, my name is Carla Navarro-Woods. I live in District 5. And first of all, thank you to the commissioners who volunteer their time to do this. It's probably a thankless task to go through something like this, but so important. A couple of comments. I actually think that the 6 district meetings are super important. We've got a lot of working families, and it's so difficult to toggle schedules and be able to make something like this and give some meaningful feedback on the process. My second comment is actually on the process. I personally prefer to hear from the commissioners first before public comment opens up, because it really gives us an opportunity to see where, maybe there's gaps in knowledge, or maybe there's a lot of institutional history there that the commissioner is able to provide or not provide. So having that kind of feedback or hearing that early on and then having an opportunity to comment afterwards, I find it to be super valuable and a little bit more engaging. So anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank you so much. Okay, do we have any other attendees that would like to speak on this? Okay, I don't see any more hands raised right at this point in time. So I believe.
All right.
Chair Honorable Johnson, you may
Yes.
now close this portion of the public hearing and consider the civic engagement and outreach plan as the IRC.
All right, so I'll close the public comment period now. As I understand it, are there still at least one other public comment period available for after we make our remarks? I'm seeing a nodding of the head, yes. Okay, so I think based on our last caller's comments, our last speaker's comments, that's probably a good idea. Let me start with our panel for any comments that you may have, responses to questions, anything along those lines. Judge Khan, let me turn to you for any thoughts you have about what we've heard today and the plan in general.
Yeah, I only know with regard to looking at the schedule of activities that requires the IRC to consider the final proposed plan, to review it prior to its recommendation to send it as approved to the City Council. That the language that I had previously read in the civic engagement and outreach plan, I thought needed to be conformed so that it is consistent with the schedule. And I would propose some amendment on page 4 of the proposed plan to the first paragraph.
And how would it read, Judge Khan?
Well, currently it reads at the conclusion of the individual district hearings and the finalization of the redistricting maps by city staff and National Demographics Corporation, the City Council redistricting adoption hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. That's how it currently reads. I would propose the following. At the conclusion of the individual district hearings and the proposed finalization of the redistricting maps by city staff and National Demographic Corporation, the Independent Redistricting Commission shall review the proposed plan before adoption and then shall submit the plan to the City Council for its final hearing, review, and adoption to be heard on Tuesday, April 12th, 2022.
So basically insert that one last review by the commission, which isn't specifically called out in the plan as it exists, correct?
It's called out in the schedule, but not in the narrative.
Okay. Does Judge White, any comment on that?
No, I would agree with that. I just noticed in the chat that we're currently live on channel 18. So that seems to resolve Mr. Green's concerns about public access. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good. I agree too. I think the narrative should meet the schedule. Is that an amendment that we should specifically vote on? We seem to be unanimous on it. Mr. Colon, can that simply be inserted?
Yes, Your Honor, by simple motion.
Okay. Judge Khan, so moved to amend the narrative?
I so move.
Judge White, second?
I'll second. Thank you.
Okay. And I agree as well. Unanimous vote. Thank you. Judge Khan, anything else that you want to say about it?
No.
Okay. Judge White, any thoughts you have?
No, I appreciate the comments of our public, particularly Mr. Green, and I think we've resolved the issue on channel 18. I appreciate his comments about his concern relative to there being possible overkill, but I can assure him that every effort's being made to ensure that the public has all the access needed to be able to ensure that this is a fair process.
Anything else, Judge White?
No, thank you very much.
I wanted to ask about the overkill comment. We always have to take that into account. We're trying to be extremely transparent and very accessible to everyone who wishes to comment. I think, if I'm correct, that we're having more public meetings than the minimum requirement. Is that so, Mr. Colon or Ms. Isa, anyone who chooses to comment?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Is there, and I honestly can't say that I know the geography well enough, so I have to answer this as not a rhetorical question. Ask this not rhetorically, but actually, is there any value or benefit to combining any of the district meetings to save costs?
Your Honor, at this point, the City Council has reviewed the plan, including hearings in each district, and they've approved of it. Okay. Mr. Green played an active role in 2015, and the problem you have, or we all have conceptually, is we won't know whether there are public comments if we don't conduct the hearings. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and we need to err on the side of more opportunity for public participation.
We had at one time some information about the cost to conduct these, which seemed to me to be very, very reasonable. I think the staff had gone out of their way to assure sites that required little cost, and other services required little cost to conduct those. So, okay. Any other comments, any member of the commission wish to make, or questions you wish to ask?
I would only add to the extent that Mr. Howard Green feels that maybe this is overkill, but a lot of this is also mandated by the Fair Maps Act and the Elections Code. So it's not simply an arbitrary exercise in trying to figure out how to get the community involved. And at any rate, the bottom line is inclusion. And the bottom line is to allow people to feel that they're really invested in their electoral system.
I would agree. I would also indicate that there was litigation, there was a settlement. We need to be extremely cautious to abide by the terms of that settlement agreement.
All right. Is there any other comments or questions before we determine whether we're going to adopt this plan? We do need to adopt this plan tonight, right, Mr. Cologne?
Thank you. That's why I came on, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions? Then, as amended by the one portion of the narrative, as moved by Judge Kahn, is there a motion to adopt the plan?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. The plan is adopted. Thank you for your hard work. These things are deceptively simple when you finish them and write them all down, but I know a lot of hard work went into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Johnson. I would now like to introduce Dr. Daniel Phillips of National Demographics Corporation, who will present an introduction to redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good to be with you, honorable commissioners and members of the public. I just want to make sure you all can hear me okay.
Thumbs up.
Okay, great, thank you. So my name is Daniel Phillips, and I am a consultant with National Demographics Corporation, and I will be presenting on some of the demographics of Santa Barbara, including the existing city council districts. So next slide, please. So this map shows the current city council districts, and you can see we have 6, and we have District 1 in red, which is the east side of the city. You have District 2 in blue, which is roughly the Mesa. District 3 in green, which you might call the west side. You have District 4 in purple, which is the hillside district, including the Riviera. District 5 in orange, which is along Upper State Street and adjoining neighborhoods. It also includes the airport, which is off screen, but it's connected by this narrow band that goes through the water and goes west. And finally, District 6 in yellow around downtown. Next slide, please. So when it comes to redistricting, we had to be mindful of a few criteria that come from both federal and state law. And so when we look at federal law, we see that the first criterion is equal population. And this refers to the fact that each district has to have roughly the same amount of people living in it. And when we refer to population, we're talking about all people, including non-citizens and children. And so there is some wiggle room, which I'll get into later, but they should be roughly equal in population. Second is to satisfy the Federal Voting Rights Act. And to do this, we would have to be mindful not to dilute the voting strength of any protected class, which is usually a racial or ethnic minority group. But on the flip side, to not engage in what is called racial gerrymandering, where you make race or ethnicity the only or main consideration when drawing your district boundaries. So a lot of that comes from Supreme Court case law. And so you see a picture of the court there. So that all falls under federal rules and laws. But to the right here, you'll see we have a whole column that comes from state law. And so the state of California has laid out criteria according to the Fair Maps Act. And what it did was provide a rank order of criteria. You'll notice there's numbering here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the idea here is that to the extent possible and practicable, you would want to draw city council districts that satisfy all these criteria. But if it's not possible to satisfy all these criteria, you would privilege higher ranked criteria. So the number one among that ranking is that the districts be geographically contiguous. So just one piece each, not disconnected pieces. Second is to not divide neighborhoods and communities of interest, which are socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together. Third is to follow easily identifiable boundaries, such as creeks, major roads, highways, certainly the coastline, ridges, etc. And fourth is to draw districts that are compact in that they do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. So those are the 4 criteria that the state outlines. And then the state adds this prohibition. The districts shall not favor or discriminate against a political party. So totally nonpartisan considerations when it comes to the state criteria here. And lastly, you'll see this third column, which are other traditional redistricting principles. So these do not come from federal or state law. These are just things that are commonly done, but are not mandatory. So the first of those is to minimize voters shifted to different election years, to avoid having some voters miss out on the opportunity to have an election and vote for candidates, so that it's like a 6-year gap instead of a 4-year gap. So after that is to respect voters' choices and continuity in office. And the idea there is to avoid having districts with 2 or more incumbents living in the district. So you don't force one incumbent to leave the council because of the way the lines are drawn, but instead leave it up to the voters to decide whether each one of them has deserved re-election. Third is to account for any future population growth you expect in the next 10 years or so. And you can do that by intentionally underpopulating a certain district while not straying too far from the equal population federal law. And lastly, preserving the core of existing districts. So you have that consistency from the original configuration to the next. The next slide, please. So here we have a table that shows different demographics of the current districts. And so you see it broken down district by district. And so what you'll see at the very top is that we have 6 districts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the total for the city. So the first line is the 2020 census count. And you can see how many people the census counted in each of those districts, and then the city as a whole, 88,665. The next line you'll see is the deviation from the ideal. The ideal is 88,665 divided by 6. And that number is roughly 14,800. And so you'll see how each district's current, or at least in 2020, its population deviates from that ideal. And you'll see that some districts have a greater deviation than others. You'll see that some districts are underpopulated and some are overpopulated. District 3 is the one that is underpopulated the most by over 1,600. And District 5 is the district that is overpopulated the most by over 1,000. And if you add those two values, you get a total deviation of just over 2,600. And so we would want to see a maximum deviation of 10% or 1,480, as opposed to what we're seeing here, which is 2,635 or 17.83%. So anything less than 10% is considered presumptively constitutional by the courts. So as things stand now, the districts would not be considered population balanced. The next series of rows you'll see is the total population of each of those districts with the racial ethnic breakdown. And you'll see that districts 1 and 3 have the highest proportion of the Hispanic population at just about 2/3 each. And you have smaller percentages of that group in other districts. And you'll see the total percentage of 39% Hispanic and 52% non-Hispanic white, 2% non-Hispanic Black, 5% Asian American for the city as a whole. And lastly, this last series of rows concerns the citizen voting age population. And these are provided because the courts have ruled that when it comes to following the Federal Voting Rights Act, this is the most important data point to consider. Those who have the ability to vote, you want to give them the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice if they happen to be from a protected class. And so you'll see that in districts 1 and 3, the percent Hispanic is 49 and 45. And for the city as a whole, it's 24% as compared to 68% non-Hispanic white and smaller percentages of other groups. And so the take-home point is that each of the 6 districts must contain about 14,800 people with a maximum deviation of 10% or 1,480 between the most and least populated district. Now, I do want to add a couple disclaimers here. First, the 2020 total population counts are raw census data. We are still awaiting the official state processed redistricting data, and that is expected very soon. So the state actually takes the raw census data and reallocates prisoner populations to their last known residential address. And so this will cause the total population numbers to change very slightly from what we have here. But we don't expect it to be a huge change. And the second disclaimer is that the data you see here are calculated from whole census blocks. Census blocks are the smallest unit of resolution that we get census data from. They're essentially city blocks. And so some of these are quite large. And so the current district boundaries actually split some of these census blocks. And so we had to assign some of these split census blocks to the current district that each overlaps with the most, that seem to have the most households in a certain district. And so that it may be possible, and we can actually split blocks again moving forward, but we generally prefer not to, because then we go into the realm of estimating as opposed to dealing with official census data. And lastly, there is a Santa Barbara story map that provides more detailed demographic data and additional demographic data from what we have here, including age and income and education, et cetera. And so we'll provide a link to this story map on the website. Next slide, please. So one of the criteria I mentioned includes not dividing neighborhoods. And when it comes to neighborhoods, we like to ask 2 questions. What is your neighborhood and what are its geographic boundaries? So examples of physical features that might define a neighborhood boundary include natural dividing lines like highways or major roads, or rivers, canals, and or hills. You could also think of neighborhoods as being centered or based around parks or schools or other neighborhood landmarks. So we hope to receive testimony from the public about what the meaningful neighborhoods are. But in the absence of that testimony, we have planning records and other similar documents that provide that definition. The city actually has a list of officially defined neighborhoods that we will also be looking at. So next slide, please. But looking beyond neighborhoods, we have this additional term, community of interest. So we, again, like to ask 2 questions when it comes to defining these. First, what is it that exactly that defines your community? So like a neighborhood, it first is a geographic area, but it is combined with some shared issue or characteristic, often a social or economic interest that is impacted by city policies. And so we'd really like to hear from members of the public what these communities of interest are and what their boundaries might be. But secondly, we would like to know, would this community benefit from being included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation? You'll notice I put quotes there, and that's because that's directly taken from the Fair Maps Act. Because the Fair Maps Act recognizes that there may be communities of interest that would benefit more from having multiple representatives on the council. But the Fair Maps Act only says that a community of interest that would benefit from being included within a single district, only that should not be divided. Lastly, the Fair Maps Act says that definitions of communities of interest may not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. Next slide, please. So we have provided public mapping and map review tools in order to facilitate this process of discovering what communities of interest and neighborhoods might exist in the city, and also giving members of the public the opportunity to give us their feedback and their take on what the district should actually look like. So we have different tools for different purposes and for different levels of comfort and interest. The first one I've already mentioned, which is the story map, which is a simple tool for learning about your community and exploring different data layers. And then we have an interactive review map, which is a simple tool for viewing multiple data layers from the story map at once, and also for reviewing draft maps once they are posted. We also have paper and Excel-based simple draft map tools. And then we have easy to use Draw Your Neighborhood tool that is coming soon, and a powerful data-rich draft map tool that is also coming soon. But whether you use the powerful but complicated online mapping tool, Excel, the paper kit, or just draw on a napkin, we welcome your maps. So feel free to use whatever is comfortable to you. Next slide, please. So the story map looks like this, and it's very similar to PowerPoint, but it's interactive, and it allows you to click on and pan around and zoom into various maps that show different data layers. And you can use this to identify communities of interest and other interesting areas. So you'll see here that this map shows the city with the officially defined neighborhoods overlaid on the existing city council districts. But there are a lot of other data there you can find as well, such as Latino citizen voting age population and income levels, et cetera. Next slide, please. The interactive review map is, it uses Esri's ArcGIS Online, and it's similar to Google Maps and ease of use. And you use this tool to review, analyze, and compare maps, not to create them. So you'll see to the right, there's different data layers that you can click on to check and uncheck to display at a given time. And so it includes all the data that you get from the story map. It just allows you to display it at your leisure and your pleasure. So next slide, please. Then we have a simple paper map drawing tool, and we call this the public participation kit. And this is particularly for those without internet access or who prefer using paper. And what you'll see here is that the city has been broken up into different population units. And so these are ways that we've decided to are good summations of city areas. They're not too small that you can't really see anything from looking at the map, but not too big that you don't have sufficient building blocks to build a district. So what you'll see here are total population counts. So the number that is displayed for each population unit is the number of people the census counted who live there. And so you would take this map and draw the districts on it, and you would manually calculate how many people live in each district you draw based on the numbers you see displayed there. And so you would try to draw 6 districts that have equal population, and then you can submit that either by taking a picture and emailing it or dropping it off at City Hall. But a link to this will be posted on the website as well. Next slide, please. Now, there's another version of the paper map tool that is also part of the public participation kit. And this is particularly for those who know Excel well and do not wish to use online tools. And it's essentially the same population units that you saw with the other map, but instead of having population numbers on it, so the total population who live in each unit, it just has ID numbers. And those ID numbers are to be matched with ID numbers that are listed in a supplementary Excel spreadsheet. And you'll see that there are yellow cells that you can use to assign each of those population units to a particular district, 1 through 6. And so you'll use the Excel spreadsheet to have Excel do the math for you. So you don't have to worry about manually calculating it yourself and maybe making a mistake. You can have Excel do the math for you, and it will show you how many people live in each district, whether the plan as a whole is population balanced, and it will also show you citizen voting age population data for each district that you create. So that's a handy tool. Next slide, please. Next, we have the District R tool, which is not yet available, but will be available soon once we get the final official state processed redistricting data. But this tool has a draw your community of interest focus, because what you can do with this tool is use a paintbrush to essentially paint over all the blocks that you want to say are in a particular neighborhood or community of interest, and give that area a name and submit it online. But the nice thing about this tool is it also allows you to do a full 6-district plan. And so you can use District R for either of those uses. But one downside is it's only available in English. Next slide, please. Which leads me to the final online mapping tool, the Maptitude Online Redistricting tool from the Caliper Company. And this tool is the most advanced tool. It has the steepest learning curve, and but it's very powerful. It allows you to access a lot of data, and it's once you use the quick start guide and the tutorial, most people can figure out how to use it pretty well. And the nice thing about this is there are 6 language options, and in contrast to the District R tool. So this will also be coming soon once the official redistricting data is available. Next slide. So this leads me to my final slide, where I hope to stir public discussion and receive input on what the neighborhoods in the city are that we should be aware of, and what are their boundaries. What are the communities of interest in the city, and what are their boundaries? And any questions about the mapping tools, I'm happy to take as well. So thank you for your attention, and happy to take your questions.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillips. It looks like we have a hand raised. Are we answering, or are we holding this space for comments and questions right now?
We are. And could I ask, unless anyone still needs it, to take the screen sharing down so that our screen of ourselves is a little easier to see?
Yes, I can remove the screen share.
All right, go ahead with the public comment.
Okay. It looks like we've got E. Howard Green again. So let's see here. Okay, E. Howard, I'm going to unmute you, and please feel free to begin speaking.
Thank you again. There were a lot of interesting points that Dr. Phillips raised, and I'd like to ask the judges, the court, to perhaps echo those questions I'm asking that you think might be important. You talked about the state revising based on the prisoner's last known residence. We must have that data from 2015. So I'd like to know the magnitude of this. Is it, 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? I don't think so. The other point that I'm very concerned about is the statement that things will be posted on the website. I don't want to use any names, but there's another commission that is being staffed by the same person as your commission, and they have very, very slight access to anything that is current. For instance, in your site, the data that is shown is from August the 17th, but my recollection is, having inspected those, that the presentation on the 25th used slightly different slides. Many of them were the same, of course. And so I again ask, when will we see what's on in the slides of tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, E. Howard Green. Are there any other questions from the attendees at this moment? Questions or comments?
There was a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you wanted to address those.
I wanted to bring that up as well. I think it goes to Dr. Phillips, right? The question is about now being in a district where there is not allowed in-person voting, which this citizen would prefer to do, and whether that can be a consideration. I didn't know that there was any district in which you could not do in-person voting, so I'll have to ask to start with that basic fact. But is that an appropriate consideration, and if so, how would we take it into account?
I will address that, if I may, Chair Johnson. It's not a redistricting consideration. Our charter was amended some years ago to allow for mail balloting, and the experience with mail balloting is generally that greater results are achieved. The city still consolidates its elections when it can with the County of Santa Barbara, and in those elections, there's often both mail-in and in-person voting.
What if there is just a city election? Are there parts of the city where only mail-in ballots are permitted?
I'm not going to answer because I don't know for this year. So I can't answer for this year. I'll be happy to report back, however.
All right. Let me start this time with Judge White. Again, in addition to that question, anything else raised by Dr. Phillips you'd like to comment on or ask about?
No, I think he's outlined it very, very well, including the federal laws and the state laws and what we derive from our common law as well.
Judge Khan?
No comments.
Okay. You know, it seemed in one part there was a requirement that we not disenfranchise people from voting from an incumbent they might like or not like for that matter by avoiding districts with 2 incumbents. And then later on it said there was, in the community of interest, one of the things we're not supposed to consider is incumbency. How do those 2 things play off against each other, Dr. Phillips?
That's a good question. And so I will say that when it comes to communities of interest, that is a state legal criterion. And so the state has laid out how you define what a community of interest is. And the way it did that was, one of the ways in which it defines it is that it's a nonpartisan entity. So you do not take partisan considerations into it. And so you're right that incumbents would not factor in determining what a community of interest is. However, you may end up, once you have determined that you have followed the state criteria and not divided communities of interest that would benefit from having a single representative on the board, then you may consider those other traditional redistricting principles. And so there may be marginal boundary cases where you've determined communities of interest well enough, at least the bulk or the core of those communities of interest, but you still might have a judgment call as far as where the line might go exactly. And in that case, you may consider incumbent locations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. You're leading us into a world that we know less about than our old world, and it's very challenging, and I'm looking forward to working with it.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. If we couldn't return to the slide sharing, we're now going to proceed to a discussion of future agendas if there's no other comment from the honorable commissioners or the public.
Okay, I'll pull this up right now.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Our next public hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, October 20, 2021. This public hearing is focused on a technical training and introduction on the mapping tools for the public. It will take place over Zoom from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And we hope that we are able to have a great turnout from the public. We encourage the public to also bring any questions they may have, in addition to freely asking questions during the public hearing.
Could I ask, would the public be able to not only watch the Zoom presentation, but also have access online if they wanted to do some practice things or something like that with the techniques that are being demonstrated? Those would be up and available for them to look at the same time as the training?
So our plan is to have a few different methods available for the public on our website. One method would be for them to be able to use websites of the mapping tools. And then another method is actually to have paper tools available so that the public can also print those out at their availability if they rather use paper tools, or if for whatever reason they are not able to access the mapping tools electronically at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions from the honorable commissioners regarding our next meeting's agenda?
No more.
No questions.
Thank you. It does appear as though I see Mr. E. Howard Green would like to speak on this point as well. If no one's opposed, I think we could allow him time to comment on this as well.
Fine with me. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, E. Howard Green, I'm going to unmute you once again.
Thank you, and I promise this is my last one for the evening. I, as the attorney mentioned, participated extensively in 2015. It would be very, very useful if the presentation materials, the training materials and so forth could be posted maybe on the Monday, just like the city council agenda packet is published ahead. We can drill down on items. The technical depth of the offerings that Dr. Phillips described is amazing and wonderful. I would like to be able to start using them as soon as they're available. And that means no lag time from the 20th, or maybe 7:30 on the 20th, before we can access them and before we have the training materials in our hands. Another question is slightly off the future agenda, but is a 2015 list of dividing objects, things like 101, State Street, Las Positas, whatever the border conditions are. I don't think our creeks count much, but maybe they do. That list be on the website. And a general comment, I'm afraid the district testimony, particularly on the higher number districts, is really going to be too late to provide meaningful change to the districts that have been proposed at some date, which is unknown, that the first cut by the consultants will be available. It certainly should not be before, should not be after the first public meeting in January, so we can comment on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And if it was okay with the honorable commissioners, I can speak on a few points and maybe also turn it over to NDC if they would like to fill in anything as well.
Please go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Green, for highlighting that it would be very useful to have the mapping tools available as soon as possible. And please do know that the city and our demographers at NDC are working diligently to make those tools available as soon as possible, given that as of the end of September, we are still receiving the final census data results from the state. It will take some time before we are able to put those materials ready, those mapping tools ready for you and for the public's use, but do know that we are working diligently to make that possible so that the public can have those accessible with the accurate data that they will be using to submit their public maps. In addition to that, we will have a period between the Wednesday, October 20th public hearing and our first district public hearing in January 2022 for the public to be able to engage with these mapping tools and participate in drafting different public maps and submitting them to our demographer in consideration for the IRC. So we hope that you also engage in that process. Regarding your questions of different types of dividing objects, I will go ahead and check in with our demographer, Dr. Phillips, to see if there's anything that could be made available for the public's consideration. Thank you.
Actually, Daniel, I can take that. Just real quick. This is Doug Johnson. I work with Daniel at NBC. It's actually a really great answer, which is on the city redistricting page, there is a link to a map where you can zoom in on the current map, and you can see very clearly all of the boundaries of all the districts. So you can see which streets, lifts, and other geographic features are used as the borders of each district. So that is already available on the city website.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. Honorable members of the commission, are there any additional comments that you would like to discuss or any other future agendas that you would like to discuss?
Judge White, anything from you?
No, thank you so much.
Judge Khan?
No.
None from me. I'm feel fully informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Johnson. You may now choose to move to end the public hearing for today.
All right. If no member of the commission has any further business, I invite a motion to adjourn.
Well, I think there's one other matter we didn't cover.
Go ahead.
That was approval of the August 25th, 21 meeting minutes.
Oh, I saw that those came in. I'm not sure. Do you want to make a motion to approve? I'll just leave it to you on that to start with.
Yeah,
Any corrections?
the only, and then this is subject to comment, just to make sure I didn't, I didn't misinterpret his presence, but I thought Attorney David Lazarus was at the last August 25th meeting as well as being present. Other than that, I would move to adopt the minutes as presented.
All right. I thought I made a note of everyone who was there. I didn't see Mr. Lazarus's name on that one. I remember he was on a previous one. I don't know if anyone else has any recollection.
Yeah, unless I can get some corroboration, then I'll withdraw that. I thought he was present, but I might be mistaken.
I usually type all the names on my notes only to imprint them on myself so that I remember everyone's names. And I don't see it, but does anyone else have a different recollection?
I don't recall his presence.
Okay. All right.
Then I would simply move to adopt the minutes as presented as being fairly represented and accurate.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Thank you for reminding us of that, Judge Khan. You're very good as a parliamentarian. You do remember these details that we sometimes overlook. Thank you.
Wow.
All right. Anything else? One last effort before we adjourn?
No.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
I so move. Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone. I personally will look very forward to actually having my adult son, who helps me with all things technological, sitting next to me when these materials are made available to us. I hope in advance a little bit of August 20th so I can look at them and feel that I can follow along a little bit. I'm very anxious to move forward with this. Thank you for all the hard work. That's all I have. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.